The Key Poses of Yoga, Your Guide to Functional Anatomy in Yoga, by Ray Long, MD, FRCSC, with illustrator Chris Macivor. An enlightening look at the anatomy of yoga poses. Using detailed, full-colour illustrations of the human musculoskeletal system, orthopedic surgeon and founder of Bandha Yoga, Dr. Ray Long, reveals the anatomical and physiological truths at the core of 55 fundamental poses of yoga. He examines the form of these poses from an anatomical perspective to reveal their unique function in the practice of yoga. With a stunning combination of graphic and textual information, Dr. Long illustrates the specific groups of muscles that work together to create optimal form in a given pose. By activating these muscles, you can learn how to deepen and stabilize a pose to obtain greater functional benefit, demonstrate how muscles operate in the various categories of poses. The author helps you influence unconscious physiological responses with conscious biomechanical actions, experience muscle awakening and increase body awareness as you engage more and more of your muscle groups during your yoga practice. This book will become your practice companion as you integrate the science and art of yoga poses for maximum physical and spiritual benefit. We love it. I was going to say, I'm starting with the hand that I'm not right-handed first. I'm starting with the way that I find hardest. I don't know if it's right or left, but the way that I find hardest, and then back again, because we are strengthening our peripheral nervous system by using our fingers. Thank you, Healing Ash. On a given day, a given circumstance, you think you have a limit, and you then go for this limit, and you touch this limit, and you think, okay, this is the limit. As soon as you touch this limit, something happens and you suddenly can go a little bit further. With your mind power, your determination, your instinct, and the experience as well, you can fly very high. Ayrton Senna. About the author. Ray Long, MD, FRCSC, is a board-certified orthopedic surgeon and the author of The Key Muscles of Hatha Yoga. Ray graduated from the University of Michigan Medical School with postgraduate training at Cornell University, McGill University, the University of Montreal, and Florida Orthopedic Institute. Ray has studied Hatha Yoga for over 20 years, traveling to India on numerous occasions to study extensively with BKS Iyengar and other leading yoga masters. RIP BKS Iyengar. About the illustrator. Chris Macivor has been involved in the field of digital content creation for well over 10 years. He is a graduate of Etobicoke School of the Arts, Sheridan College and Seneca College. Chris considers himself to be equally artistic and technical in nature. As such, his work has spanned many genres from film and television to video games and underwater imagery. Working with Dr. Long on the Scientific Keys book series, he has endeavoured to digitally reproduce the biomechanical perfection of the human body. With a keen eye for subtle lighting and a passion to strive for excellence in his art, Chris constantly seeks to bring his imagery to life. And I think he's done a beautiful job. I'm very impressed with both of these. Table of contents. Introduction. How to use this book. Part 1. Theory. Biomechanics of stretching. Physiology of stretching, muscle spindle, reciprocal inhibition and the Golgi tendon organ, they all relate to the physiology of stretching. Combining biomechanics and physiology, muscle awakening, recruitment and banders, and the 10 ball pictures. Part 2, practice, preparatory poses, sun salutations, standing poses, hip openers, forward bends, twists, back bends, arm balances, inversions, and restorative poses. Appendices, guide to body movement, index of anatomy, index of poses. So we're going to be reading the introduction. In that figure we just showed you, it's the biceps and the brachialis, and the biceps and brachialis are the synergists of elbow flexion. The triceps as elbow extensors are antagonists of elbow flexion. Introduction. My first spiritual teacher, author and mystic Robert A. Johnson, taught me to look at what is. He was speaking about life in general, and his advice applies to the practice of hatha yoga as well. Throughout our first book in this series, the key muscles of hatha yoga, which we will be reading in the next video, we illustrate the relationship between form and function for the bones, joints, ligaments, and muscles. Similarly, looking at the form or shape of any given yoga pose reveals its unique function. Individual joints have a number of specific muscles that create movement. Look at figure 1 to see how activating the biceps and brachialis muscles flexes the elbow and lengthens the muscles that oppose this action. Those at the back of the upper arm, the triceps. Just so you've got a visual image of what we just talked about there. Individual yoga poses have specific groups of muscles that work together to create optimal form. I call these muscle groups the synergists of the pose. You can deepen and stabilize a pose by activating these muscles. Look at figure 2 to see this concept in action with the standing pose Prasarita Padottanasana. I love that word, Prasarita Padottanasana. Our favourite is that we found really hard, Triangamukha Kapada Paschimottanasana. So that's the pose there. So that figure 2 that I just showed you, to see this concept in action with the standing pose Prasarita Padottanasana. This image illustrates how contracting the muscles at the front of the thigh, hip and torso, the quadriceps, psoas and rectus abdomini, deepens the pose and stretches the opposing muscles at the back of the thigh and buttocks and along the spine. This is how combining the synergists in a yoga pose creates the optimal function benefit for the practitioner. Yoga poses are like keys that unlock our conscious awareness of the body. Forward bends stretch and release the structures on the back of the body, while strengthening the muscles on the front of the body. Back bends have an opposite effect, and so on for the different categories of poses. Knowledge of the functional anatomy of yoga reveals the mechanisms behind these processes. The key poses of hatha yoga is intended to be a visual reference for the practitioner to aid in his or her individual journey. It illustrates 55 of the fundamental poses of hatha yoga, the suggested positions of the major joints and muscles that contract to create these key positions, as well as the muscles that stretch in the various poses. Part 1 of the key poses of hatha yoga illustrates the science behind the biomechanics and physiology of stretching muscles. Part 2 applies this knowledge to various categories of poses to unlock the benefits. So it's got a figure 2 again, which I'm going to show you again, the synergists blue and antagonist red in Prasarita Padottanasana. Practicing yoga is an exploration of our individual bodies. Bear in mind that there are many interpretations of the poses. There are also variations for the postures, depending on the system of hatha yoga and the experience of the practitioner. Enjoy your practice and seek out your own best interpretations. Find out what works for you in opening the door to your individual experience of yoga. Namaste, Ray Long. How to use this book. Practicing yoga using the right side of the brain. Visual arts often approach their subjects using the right side of their brain. This is because the right brain is concerned with creativity and spatial awareness. When an artist undertakes to draw an elbow, for example, he or she will often discard preconceived ideas of how an elbow should look and switch to a visual mode of thought. Artists do this by thinking in terms of form, angles, light and shadow. What emerges is a unique image. This concept is well described by author Dr. Betty Edwards in her groundbreaking work, Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. Practicing yoga can be approached in much the same way. For example, looking at the form of downward dog pose reveals that the arms and legs are straight and the hips are flexed. What's that picture there? One hand. There. I'll read that again. For example, looking at the form of downward dog pose reveals that the arms and legs are straight and the hips are flexed. We can make our own rendition of this pose by activating the muscles that best create this form. In this case, we contract the triceps to straighten the elbows, the quadriceps to straighten the knees, and the hip flexors to bend the torso. This process can be applied to any yoga pose through a basic knowledge of functional anatomy. In this way, we can use the musculoskeletal system to create the forms of yoga with the body, much as one would use a brush or chisel to create a work of art. This results in a cognitive shift to visual right brain thinking and evokes a trance-like meditative state. The key poses of hatha yoga illustrates a variety of the suggested muscles that can be activated or relaxed to deepen and improve yoga poses. First, take a gestalt approach and simply enjoy the images, allowing them to permeate your unconscious mind. Then, begin to break the poses down by looking at specific joints and experimenting with the muscles around them, surrounding them. My bodies love these books, and so there's a lot of my alternate personalities that don't learn in the left brain way that most of my conscious mind's been learning through the general academic world as we know it at the moment. The Sanskrit word for focus is dristi. Dristi, your knowledge of the body to create dristi in your practice. The Sanskrit word for focus is dristi. Use your knowledge of the body to create dristi in your practice. I recommend limiting your concentration to one muscle group at a time in any given pose. Focus on the large muscles at first to create a specific movement, and then use the smaller muscles to refine the movement. Go slowly and gently, consolidating your knowledge of anatomy and physiology over time, remembering that your brain will unconsciously integrate what you learn during the time between your practices. Above all, have fun and practice safely. So now we're just going to go into this section. Part 1, Theory. Use Part 1 to learn about the science behind the biomechanics and physiology of yoga. Part 2, Practice. Use Part 2 to learn about the specific poses. Muscles that are activating, contracting, are coloured blue, and muscles that are stretching are red. Most poses also have an inset image detailing some aspect of the musculoskeletal system in that particular pose. And that's the range of the blues to red. Appendix A is a guide to body movement, and this is great because it shows the different planes of the body. Use Appendix A as a reference point for individual joint movement, and Appendix B, Index of Anatomy. Use Appendix B to review muscle and bone names and locations on the body for more detailed information on musculoskeletal anatomy in relation to yoga. Volume 1 of this series, The Key Muscles Hatha Yoga, is recommended. And that's that one there. Then it goes into Part 1, Theory. And that's where we'll get to next time. Namaste.